morning, everybody, and welcome to the latest in the Flex webinar series. I'm Jason Zukevich here with Chris Stein today. As you're all aware, our topic for today is how to accept a deposit payment on the front end of a transaction and see that all the way through closure. We've had Flex payments live for about a good 3 weeks now. We're really excited about kind of the activity and the feedback we've seen to date. We've got a lot of you already active on the platform, accepting credit card payments, accepting ACH payments. We're working hard to make the product better on a daily basis and make sure that we're taking moments like this to really help you understand how you can best leverage the product as it stands. So with that, I will hand it over to Chris for today's topic.
Thank you, Jason. Yeah, it's been great getting people on the platform, getting early feedback and having great results, and people really enjoying having the efficiency of having payments built into Flex and getting that process just dialed in. So whenever you start to work in new areas, you get more time in that area, get more questions and more feedback. And so today we want to talk about how to handle deposits. And one of the things that we always try to take into consideration with Flex and these webinars is every customer of ours is different. We have the gamut of what we call, smaller companies, startup companies, companies with less of an accounting background and just a much more lean process. And then we've got large enterprise companies that have very tight accounting integrations and things like that. And so we try to provide a platform that is scalable, that allows each company to operate in their own unique needs and functionality. And so we're going to be going over a couple different ways that we can handle deposits, from the most simple functionality to a more complex, robust feature set.
And I'll just quickly jump in. We do have the Q&A open, so if anyone has any questions along the way, just pop them into the Q&A, and I'll work to interject them as we go forward.
Yeah, we will definitely accept QA and have those questions put forth at the end of the time. We may not be able to get to every question, but we will also be recording this, sending it out, and also providing a FAQ and answering all questions in there also as a follow-up. So I always, whenever we get into anything with, if you're ever going to hit accounting, disclaimer, hey, please note the information we're providing is for general guidance based on our software's functionality and for specific accounting and tax implications. We strongly recommend consulting your accountant or qualified tax professional. So with that, let's get into the webinar. So background, we have had payments embedded into Flex, and customers have asked on what's the best way for them to handle deposits. And we've got different architectures and configurations, how we can handle this in many different ways. And hopefully presenting these allows you to choose which workflow platform works best for you. Some key concepts when we get into deposit invoices, just want to make sure everyone's aligned. Typically, deposit invoices are either a single payment sent for a deposit amount, or they are true deposit invoices. Typically, they are single line item invoices for deposits prior to the services being provided to your end client. The final invoices, if you're using that process, we recommend generating final line item invoices, and that includes the recognition of the deposits that you received previously to offset that in the final invoice. We're going to be doing a couple different demos, bouncing back and forth between the slides and functionality. And we're going to start off with doing without a deposit invoice, but just using the payment functionality to send out a specific payment prior to doing work and following that up. So in this example, I've got this quote. Lisa's going to be my customer. I'm going to be sending just simple payment links. She's going to apply them. We're going to do the job, generate the invoice, and send the final payment link. So I've got this test job, a very simple, she's going to rent out a speaker package. And in this example, that we can send the payment link for the full amount, but we could also just send a amount, put a description, deposit for services, something like that. And this will send out this link with the report to Lisa. We'll send that out to her and we'll show you how the integration works just as a reminder. I'll show you in a quick example here for those who weren't with us previously. This customer got the report, the form letter that was sent along with it. There are links for them to pay. They click that link. In there, they have the ability, this was already paid, sorry. They have the ability to pay on a credit card or through ACH. When that payment is processed, that information comes back into Flex as form of notifications, and also those payment links are created. So let's take a look in here. These are some notifications that we received. We haven't received this as of yet from Lisa, but let me double check in here. If we go to integrations, pay engine, we have the status. We have, perfect, it's already been paid, but there's the job, there's the link, there's the status in here. Let's check this one more time. Great. We got notification. So the user who sent this will be notified that it has been paid. Let's return to this quote. I'm going to do a quick refresh in here. We now have a record of the payment. It has been documented in here. And so in this example, we, through workflows, might want to confirm and create the pull sheet. Scan the gear in and out. We have payment for a deposit functionality as that. When the final job is invoice, we've always used the ability to generate an invoice through workflow that will copy that quote detail information. Through the generating of that invoice, what that has done is we've now created an invoice as a child item, and we've moved that payment and applied it towards that. And if there were any changes, we could modify and add some changes if needed. But from here, we can also send a payment link for the final balance due amount. And send that out. And so as Lisa goes through and processes that, when that payment gets completed, you'll see two different payments associated with that invoice. If the final balance due is 0, it'll also update the workflow to be marked as invoice paid. And so this is the most simplest form of simply using a payment with a note that says this is a deposit for a partial payment up front with the customer, and not using any deposit invoicing functionality. It's using the payment to just get that communicated. In this instance, I'll go back to the integration and on the payment link, and you'll see now we've got two payments, one paid and for the same job, but two different payment links. And so as that gets processed, let's go through and do a quick refresh and see how quick on the draw Lisa is. Still processing. Let me do a quick refresh. Great. That's been paid. Let's go to the reload. And so, as stated earlier, now this final invoice with the line item detail has both payments. Those are recorded in here. And as status changes are, it's been automatically updated to invoice paid by the webhook. So, simplest form for a very easy to use using just the payment as deposit invoices. Okay, working with deposit invoices, we have been able to use deposits, and these are typically what we would call them. They're advance payments. They're recorded as liabilities or goods or services prior to the delivery of those. And these deposits are used to confirm our customer's commitment and provide upfront funds to offset the cost. So that's a real reason why in our industry, if I'm going to be putting on a $100,000 event and I'm going to be booking labor and I'm going to be creating rental POs, I may want money up front to make sure this is a confirmed job, to help pay for the rentals, all the hotels provided. That's a great example of why I would want a deposit. What we're going to be doing is using our incremental invoicing to create a single line item request for a deposit and referencing the quote that this will be applied towards. Then at the end of the job, we're going to create a new line item invoice with a slightly different workflow. And then we're going to make sure that we're going to be offsetting that deposit. So in the final invoice, we'll get line item information, and then we're going to be taking that deposit line item and adding it and offsetting it, making it apply negatively towards the final balance due. So what we're going to be doing here is creating and updating invoice workflows and taking that functionality all the way through. We're going to be creating an incremental invoice, and then we're going to create a new workflow that will not just create and update an invoice, it will take and create a brand new invoice. So in past, most of the invoices that we've created through a create update process, it will generate the invoice. If we make changes, it will override that and update that information. Incrementals are ways that we've been able to create invoices for typically long-term rentals that are ongoing that we might want to bill on a monthly basis. And this new functionality, we're going to take a little bit of both of those and use them together. There's going to be two modifications, and support can definitely help you with this. We're going to add a new workflow job that's slightly different than our normal quote or our invoice generation job. And then we're going to change and update a workflow action. So if you're not familiar with incremental invoices, these can be found by going to Menu, Projects, Element Definitions, and whatever you're using for your quotes, for your quoting element, that's where we'll find the setting. And we'll go over these settings really quick. So Menu, Projects, Element Definitions. If I'm using our quote element, there is a header here called Copy Targets. We've been able for a long time to create partial invoices or incremental invoices. So this is signifying the end element that we're going to create. And this is a setting for this line item that we're going to create in this incremental. What resource type do we want to use? Resources type can be mapped to accounting GL account. So when you export it, what GL account do you want to put this line item that we're creating? So that's a little information on where the functionality for the incremental invoice comes from. The workflow job, those can be found under menu, projects, and workflow jobs. And I'll give you a little example of the invoice generator is a job that we can create. This is the element that it will create. It will take what we are generating and it will become a child. So if you have a quote, this invoice will become a child. And we're going to update that. Typically, if we change our quote and we need to update the invoice, it's going to be processing this workflow invoice generator. We are going to create a different workflow job that will not update because we want to keep the existing incremental after the fact. So in this example, I created a new financial document generator called Invoice for Final Balance. It's still going to generate an invoice. The invoice that's created is going to be a child of the quote, but we're changing the match mode. And what this is saying is, I want you to generate a new element, even if other invoices exist. Don't override them, create a new one, and don't change any existing payments. So those are the settings that we created on this workflow job. And then we're going to create the ability to trigger this job through a workflow action. So I'm going to go to projects and workflows. We're using our quote workflow. And as an example, if we were in a confirmed state, I double-clicked the confirmed state, clicked outflow action, and created a new action. And this was the action that I created. I called it Generate Final Balance Invoice. It's going to go from confirmed state to invoice created state. And it's going to process that new job that we created. So those are the main settings that we're doing if we want to use a separate incremental invoice to get a deposit and then generate a new non-overriding invoice at the end of this process. So we're going to do this demo here, but we're going to create a quote. And let's see, and it looks like I missed a step on there, but let's get into this demo. So I'm going to close up and go to this job. Same job. We're going to process this with a slightly different workflow. Same information here, a $600 job. But instead of just sending the payment, we're going to generate an incremental invoice. So we're going to go to the financials menu over here, and I'm going to create an incremental invoice. Typically, when customers have done incremental invoice, you're going to have this for 5 months, and I'm going to create 5 different invoices for those 5 months for a specific amount each time. In this instance, I only need one deposit. I can assign a due date to this invoice that we're creating. I can update the percentage of what the deposit amount is. For now, we're going to create it at a 50% deposit. With that second one deleted, it's notifying me here that you're not incrementally billing the full amount, just a warning, and I'm going to create that. So now, as part of this tree, we've got a quote with an invoice. This invoice is a single line item resource. It's a deposit type. It's giving me the information here. requesting $300, refer to the quote. So in this instance, I'm going to send the payment link to Lisa again. And so when we get this payment back, we have the quote, we already have an invoice, and we'll get a payment assigned to this. We can export that through workflows. And because this is in blue, that means that's the element that we're working on. And so we can export that to QuickBooks and send this deposit invoice out to QuickBooks to keep Flex and our QuickBooks in sync with each other. We don't have to duplicate work. Let's see, I'm sure Lisa is in the back end processing that. Let's see. So that was the last link there. Let me go to our agreements pay engine. Let's see. Oh, let me refresh. There we go. There's the new one, invoices paid. Let's go back to this page. So payment has been created. All the information has been updated, and this incremental invoice has been marked as paid through the webhook, and notifications have been sent. And if we export this invoice out to QuickBooks, it will go out with both the invoice detail and the payment. And so that payment of record will show up in QuickBooks also. Let's take this a final step. And let's say at the last second, the client decided that they needed some delivery service. They couldn't come and pick it up. And I'm going to add a delivery here. And we can say each at 250. And with that, I can now through workflow. Oh, I forgot to confirm the quote. We would have confirmed that. Updated the pull sheet. Now with this workflow in a confirmed state, as we've adjusted our workflow, I can say generate a final balance due invoice. That delivery pickup fee, there's a couple ways that we could have handled that. I could have updated the quote and then pushed those updates further back to the invoice, or some people leave the quote intact and then make the changes to the final invoice. But here we have the new final invoice, and the last step of this process. So now we have our quote with our deposit invoice with its payment, and we generated this line item detail. And the last piece of the puzzle that we recommend in this process is we're going to take and copy this line of the deposit that we already requested. And I can now paste that copied line and offset that amount. So where before the total balance due was $11.50, I want to make sure that we are recognizing what we've already received. And so the final balance due now is $5.50. So here's the services we provided. Here's the deposit you've already paid, offsetting the total. And the final balance due is $5.50. And now with that, I can send out that payment link for the $5.50 amount. That will take Lisa to the payment portal. We will then get a secondary payment applied to the secondary invoice, and that can be marked as paid as far as that functionality is concerned. While she's processing that, there is always a question of, do you want more than one deposit invoice? Things like that. I'm going to talk about that and show you how you might do that while Lisa's processing the payment. So in this scenario, if we went to the financials and created incremental, I have a due date of tomorrow and I need 30%. And I could put a note over here and rewrite this. Deposit 1. And I could change this to deposit 2. And let's put a due date in there. That's due on Saturday. And I may want that for 30% also. And it's recalculating that. So we're going to get a total of 60% of this up front. And so in this scenario, we now have 2 incremental deposits. There's deposit 1. There's deposit 2. Doing our workflow, we can then generate the final invoice. And in this instance, we would want to copy both of those deposits and offset them on the final invoice. But let's go back to this job. We got the payment, and let's reload this. We've got notification of the second payment. We've got the payment applied and the workflow updated. And so in this scenario, we now have 2 different invoices, 2 different payments. And once that's completed, I would export that secondary invoice to QuickBooks. That will send over both the invoice with all the line items. From an accounting process, that deposit that was made in the first invoice that added to a $300 deposit GL account, this one is now offsetting that as an example. So that's
Hey,
how that works both in Flex and QuickBooks.
Chris, we had a question come in around, does each invoice kind of deposit and the final invoice have separate invoice numbers that affect the push to QuickBooks? Do they go with separate invoice numbers?
So we did 3 different demos. So in the first demo, there was one invoice with a single invoice number with multiple payments. So in QuickBooks, it would show up as one item. Using the incremental workflows that we've created, each one of those will have their own separate invoice and invoice number.
Perfect.
So let's make sure I am verifying that. So invoice 1 and invoice 2 had that. Did that answer that question?
It did.
So depends on your workflow, but the first workflow was a single invoice with a single number. The second one had 2 invoices, 2 payments, unique numbers for invoice. The third one with 2 deposits, and a final would have 3 final invoices with 3 separate invoice numbers. What other questions?
Let's see if we get a few more coming in, but that was the one we had gotten so far.
Okay.
Any other questions out there? I know we're at the time we had reserved, but we can give it another minute. If there's any other questions, please send them our way.
So yes, to review, there's multiple ways that we can handle this. One is using a single invoice and payments, multiple payments. And the second one is using deposits through incremental functionality to create a separate invoice to get a payment applied to that, and then a final balance due that off with an offset for that deposit. And that creates two separate invoices towards a single quote.
Chris, just a quick question here on how sales tax is calculated. I think, I don't, maybe you can just answer that. I know that's not necessarily new with payments, but.
Correct. Everything that we've done here, the total amount on, say, the quote is affected by all the line items with QuickBooks and everything. So that deposit invoice is just taking that amount that you started out with and breaking that up by a percentage. And so if we had tax on that, then that would calculate differently. And so instead of this being a quote for 600 as an example, it would have been 625 and 50% of that would have been a $312.50 as an example. So the incremental just takes whatever that total is and divides that by the percentage that you tell it to. And the end invoice that also included sales tax would include all that detail in the final balance due based on the total balance with tax minus deposits.
Right. Yeah. As for how it's calculated, right? That's just the same way it's traditionally been in Flex. No changes with payments. So, the tax is calculated the same way it has been
Yeah.
historically.
And if you need help setting up those tax configurations, contact support at flexrentalsolutions.com.
Cool. And Krista, maybe as the last one, I know we were just going to talk a little bit about kind of the processing fees and kind of what the latest is there, and just kind of give people a quick update.
Yeah, that was another large question out of the payments webinar. How do we calculate a percentage that gets added onto the final due? We have the ability to put that and calculate that in Flex, but with the payment functionality, we are asking our payment provider to calculate that for us. We're in the process of working with them to get that configured. We hope to have that set up by the end of the year, hopefully, fingers crossed. But what that will allow you to do is send one invoice with the total amount, and whether the client pays with credit card or ACH, the final balance due will be adjusted based on which payment type they choose to pay with. So that is functionality that is coming in a forthcoming release.
Yeah, and I think they can send it, one invoice, three invoices, however many invoices you want. It would allow you to kind of pass through those processing fees to your end customer. So as soon as that comes available,
that would be passed through from the processing side.
yes.
It won't need a configuration in Flex.
Right. Yep. And as soon as that is available, we'll certainly alert everyone, and we'll likely schedule a quick follow-up webinar, or either that or share a video with you just so you can see it in action and make sure you understand how it works. So I think with that, thank you everyone for making the time this morning. We'll follow up with a recording of this. We certainly appreciate your interest and you being on this payments journey with us. So thanks again.
If you have any questions, you can contact payments if you're interested, payments at flexrentalsolutions.com to find out more about that. If you need any help and follow-up questions with configurations, email training@flexrentalsolutions.com. Or if you have specific questions, how do I configure sales tax? Support at Flex Rental Solutions is probably the best way to go to just how do I set up sales tax?
Awesome. Thanks again, everyone. Have a good rest of the week.
Thanks. Bye-bye.